Well, I hope that it becomes an important platform, a leading platform, a premier platform, in a way that it is seen as useful, as relevant, targeted on national development policies and priorities, domesticated by different African countries, seen as an investment hub, seen as an innovation hub, seen as a platform that allows many of the post-carbon ideas, post-carbon related solutions to come to scale. I see it as something that has the potential to really create, almost a groundswell of solutions, and solutions that would take Africa into that sort of next generation of post-carbon ideas, and a place where we can basically say that yes, we have come far enough to begin to see a world whereby green solutions are thriving, and green solutions are creating jobs, they are creating growth, and they are also better for other things like our health and our well-being. Each COP is an opportunity for parties to prepare themselves. And I think that preparation is needed at all fronts. It's needed everywhere, but particularly in the continent of Africa, where, as we mentioned before, infrastructure is not quite there. Knowledge is there, but it's fragmented. And so what we've seen in this COP is that there are several areas where we will have to basically put knowledge forward. We would have to front load knowledge as part of our solution in the area of climate finance. There are new monies that have been made available. Whether we agree about the amount of monies, whether it's sufficient or insufficient, we still have to present bankable proposals. Those proposals would ride essentially on knowledge and the specific sector where we're looking to make those abatement, those emissions cuts. So it's important that we get ourselves ready in the area of climate finance, in the area of climate adaptation, equally the same. I mean, the continent is under-resourced when it comes to adaptation activities, and yet it's a continent that's doing quite a lot. In fact, the whole of the developing countries, I'd say, are doing, they're doing a lot already in adaptation. But we need to be able to see what are some of these adaptation projects that can be scaled. A lot of things we're doing need to be scaled in a way that will bring about that transformation that is so essential to drive the post-carbon economy. So I think there are several ways around methane reduction, around areas in terms of carbon markets, several other decisions that came out of the COP that we might, not even might, I would say we will definitely need greater knowledge and teams that can actually put those knowledge forward and make sure that the knowledge is contextualized to the needs of the different countries in Africa. The consortium is not a monopoly of just African, I'd say African scholars or African experts. I think we're looking for bespoke policies, and that can come from anywhere, but it's essential that we take advantage of people within the scientific community, within the business community, that have first-hand knowledge about some of the major problems that are really stalling progress towards a post-carbon economy. And so those people will be at the forefront of, enabling a set of solutions and looking into those solutions. But they, of course, will work with other people from different parts of the world, from the north, from developing countries, countries like Brazil, countries like India, so it will foster a kind of triangular set of relationships, south, south, north, south, etc. But the essence of it is that we're trying to extract knowledge where it exists and have an element of comparability in terms of which knowledge might work in which context and for which sector. And how do we enable that knowledge in a way that advances policies further than, in business as usual times? The reason why it stands out is that it has a completely different approach. Oftentimes we start with a research problem and what we want to do, or vision of where we want the post-carbon economies to go. And in this case, I think we're saying, let's start from the policy challenges. Let's understand it from the policy makers. Let's poll 5 of the most compelling challenges that they have. And let's look at some of the most critical sectors where these challenges are more prominent. And let's now see how we can organize like a work group where you have these 3 communities, as I mentioned, that are looking at the problem from that sort of a deeper dive to really understand what are the solutions that they can bring to the table. And that's how we envisage that it becomes almost like a circular thing. You start from a challenge, you understand the challenge from a contextual perspective, you bring your best people on board, they try to work out what possible scenarios they can develop or what are the potential solutions, practical solutions they could put to the table. Those solutions would go around that sort of workstation, which is the matchmaking service I talked about, go around this workstation, and they vet it. The solutions are vetted from the perspective of the business community and the policymakers as well, because all of these communities are also communities that are in demand of that knowledge. So they are principal beneficiaries, if you like, and they would need to basically say, how is this going to work for them? Is it something related to entrepreneurship and in a particularly green sector? Is it about green enterprises? What are some of the practical solutions that we're putting forward? And are those solutions scalable? Are there sufficient technology innovations involved in the solutions that we're proposing? Will it potentially create jobs? Are there policy challenges that they must begin to pay attention to? And so the list goes on, but it goes in that sort of circular way, with each one of these stakeholders doing their quick analysis of what it needs. And there's a mobility element, because you're not just stationed one place, you are basically taking the problem, walking away from the station and going to find real answers, practical answers within the countries where these problems are experienced. The idea of after carbon came to me at COP26. I believe that was the Glasgow COP. And it wasn't a particularly, well, it was a memorable COP. It was memorable because it was during the time of Corona, and circumstances were very different from many of the COPs I've seen, whereby you'd have to go in and get checked and tested rather, and you get tested before you get in. And so beyond just that sort of infrastructure and the atmosphere, which was somewhat heavy, I think because of Corona, I was also thinking about what can we take away from this COP. And the idea came to me that it was essential for us to put knowledge at the forefront of a post-carbon economy. I was convinced that whether we were arguing for or against, reality is what it is, and African countries will have to get themselves prepared. At the time, looking at the infrastructure, the ecosystem, I had a sense that many of us were talking about what a post-carbon economy could look like, but we hadn't actually prepared ourselves for what that infrastructure would mean. What does preparedness look like? For instance, if you're looking at the hard to abate sectors, what do we need to do to the transport sector? We're talking about technologies, and we're talking about the climate smart agriculture. But what would climate smart agriculture look like if you were to throw technologies into that mix? How would that look like? And how prepared were we? How many institutes do we have in Africa that are training students in that sector to be climate efficient, agriculturally efficient? So there was a sense that there was a deficit in that preparedness. And so that's how the idea came to say, how do we create a platform that is going to support a matchmaking initiative whereby you would have the main stakeholders, and our principal stakeholder will be the policymakers. They were sort of the prime group we were looking at. So having policymakers, having researchers, and having business community talking about what those sustainable initiatives could look like from a practical perspective. But they had to start with a problem. They had to start with a challenge. They had to basically say, if we want to scale hydrogen, there are certain things that we are not actually able to do now. What are some of those things? How can we bring it to scale? What would it mean for the aviation sector? You know, they had to be very pointed about the particular areas they're having challenges, and that's how we decided that. You know, I brought the idea to the team. We sat around the table and we came up with things that we could do.